feel so famous. Okay, so it is good to be here with you guys. So I told you I live in Oklahoma City, but I used to live in Grand Rapids, Michigan area-ish. Well, Lansing, actually it's probably closer to Lansing. I used to work in Westphalia. I know there was some people from around here from that area. Okay. So my husband and I were both musicians, and we were doing Music for Youth conference out in California. And we were going to Santa Barbara at the You Only Live Once conference, and this will be relevant in a few minutes. So we do this conference, and I was pregnant at the time with our third child, and we had two smaller children that were with my parents at home, because obviously if you're pregnant with your third child, you have two other children. Anyway, they were with my parents. So my husband and I were flying home. We're flying into Chicago. And as I boarded the plane, my husband and I weren't sitting next to each other. Us and our band, we all had different seats. And I'm boarding the plane, and there's a lady who's already seated. And as I'm getting into my seat, she goes, "Are you a Christian?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "It's so good to sit next to a Christian." All right. Okay, yeah, that's good. So I sit down, and we chatted for a minute, and then I fell asleep. And there was another gentleman on the right side of me, a young guy. And the flight's going fine. And then all of a sudden, we're going in for the landing. And then all of a sudden, we shoot back into the sky. And I was like, I don't think that's supposed to happen. I've flown a lot. Usually, when you descend, you go all the way down. This time, we go back up. And so I was like, well, this is really strange. And then all of a sudden, all the cabin lights come on. And the flight attendants say, "Where is the manual?" I'm like, "Manuel? They were looking for a pass." You know, I'm thinking, well, maybe somebody had a medical emergency. But then I'm like, well, wouldn't you want to handle it on the ground? Like, this doesn't make any sense. So they open this overhead compartment, and they take out this huge binder, and they run back up to the front of the plane. Okay, this isn't good. So I start to pray my rosary, and it seems like forever. It was probably only a couple minutes, but the pilot gets on the intercom, and he says, "We do not know if our landing gear is down. The alert, the light, there's an error in the sensor. We can't tell. We've been trying to fly around the tower, but it's too dark. They can't see if the wheels are down, so we're gonna have to make an emergency landing." And so they tell you to take out your safety card and read the directions. And I'm like, I mean, it may as well have been written in Greek. I'm so in a panic, I can't even look at this. I always thought, like in the horror movies, when you have, the gall to criticize the people that are in the horror movie, and you're like, why would you go in there? Why are you hysterical? Like, you should have a plan. Like, I'm the hysterical woman in the horror movie that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So I had to put it away. I can't even look at it. So then finally the flight attendant gets over the intercom, and she goes, "Okay, we're gonna prepare for this. Everybody needs to take off your glasses, any big jewelry," to take off my earrings. Anything that's around you needs to go under the seat in front of you very firmly. We don't want anything that could fly up and hit somebody. And when we say brace, you're gonna cross your arms in front of you, on the seat in front of you, and you're gonna lean your forehead down, and you're gonna stay there until we land. And we'll coach you through this. So we're putting all our things away. They say you're not allowed to take anything off of the plane with you. When we land, you just get yourself and your fellow passengers off, and you do not take anything off of the plane with you. And later, my husband goes, "All I could think about was my guitar." I was like, "Oh, not your pregnant wife? Okay." He's like, "I knew you would be fine, but my guitar." I'm like, okay. And so we're preparing, we're moving everything, we're taking our jewelry, glasses, and everything. And the lady sitting next to me, she goes, "Do you want to pray with me?" And I said, "Sure." So she grabs my hand and she goes, "God, don't let us die." And I was like, I don't want to pray with you anymore. So I'm going through, all this stuff is going through my mind. And I'm like, Lord, what about my kids? I can't even say anything to my husband. All I see is his shiny little bald head, like way up on the right of the plane. I can't tell him, like, hey, if anything happens, I love you a lot. That'd be awkward on the plane. I guess I could have. It was embarrassing. I'm kind of shy. And so, but I was thinking about my 2 kids that were with my parents. And we had told them we'd be right back. What's going to happen with them? And I started to cry, and I started to think about all my sins and just like, Lord, I'm sorry for this, and I'm sorry for this. And I'm sorry, and I made an act of contrition, and I was just, Lord, have mercy on me. Please take me to heaven. Please take care of my kids. And I kept getting drawn back to my kids, my kids, my kids. And I heard the Lord speak. There's a handful of times where I've known that the Lord was speaking right to me. And this was one of those times where I heard the Lord say, you love your children so much that you would give your life for them. But I already did. So I had this peace in my heart, and I was like, okay, whatever happens, God's going to take care of this. So we're getting ready for our descent, and the pilot gets on the intercom, and he says, look to the person on your left and to the person on your right. These are the people that you are responsible for getting off of this plane. And for the first time, everybody looked around each other on this plane. You know how a lot of times you get on a plane or you get in an elevator or something and you don't want to talk to anybody or make eye contact. You're like, oh, I'll just get on my phone. But we really looked at each other. And you just had this love for this person. And I want you to be okay. And the flight attendants get on the intercom. They say, okay, brace, brace, brace. Brace, brace, brace. We cross our arms in front of us. We put our foreheads down. And we landed just fine. No issues. The landing gear was down. But then we looked out the window and we saw dozens and dozens and dozens of emergency vehicles. They weren't letting any other planes land except for our plane. They were prepared for us to come and for an emergency. It was very surreal. When we got off the plane, I was shaking so bad. And our super, super tall, skinny bass player was like, do you need help getting off the plane? And I'm like pregnant. I'm like, that's a nice thought. Like, you can't help me with this. And just everybody was bonded together through that experience. So the topic for today that we were given to talk about in the women's session is, am I enough? When we were on this plane, when people board on a plane or when you see somebody for the first time, all these judgments go through your mind, right? And maybe you think, well, that's a person I'd want to be friends with, or that person's kind of weird, or I don't know, that person seems awkward, or that person's rude, whatever it may be. We make all these judgments, and especially as women, we tend to not so much, I don't even think, judge one another as much as we judge ourselves. I'm not enough. And we're comparing ourselves. So we have to put somebody else down because we're judging and comparing ourselves. And that's really hard. And when I was telling my husband, I don't know how to prepare for this talk. And he goes, do you think that maybe you don't know how to prepare for this talk because this is a question that you're struggling with? And I was like, no, I'm almost 40. Like, I've got things figured out, right? But when he said that, something struck me. And then he and we've been going to a personal trainer. And because we're like trying to get in shape and not die by 45. And so when we're working with this trainer, my husband pointed out, I don't have to answer, have I done enough? My trainer answers that for me. My trainer says, you can do a little bit more. Or my trainer says, you need to slow down, like that's good, that's enough. And it's the same with our relationship with God. So the bad news, I'm going to start with the bad news. The bad news is our world will always tell you that you're not enough. Always. If you are a working mom, you're not enough. If you're not working, you're not enough. If you're a mom, you're not enough. If you don't go to college, you're not enough. If you're not thin enough, you're not enough. And the world will always have these messages for us. That's the bad news. But the good news, and the good news that I want you to cling to, is that you don't have to answer this question, am I enough? Because God has already answered it for you, and he says yes. It's so much so that question of of enough was the question that caused Eve to turn away from God. Because here she is, she's in this garden. God has just created her and Adam. He's given them everything that he has. And yet the devil comes along as the serpent. And you know the story where like she eats the apple. But here's the thing that we always miss. She eats the apple because he has planted a seed in her heart that God is holding back on her. God is not an altogether good father. He's not giving you everything. So you need to eat this fruit. And the tree is in the garden not because God is testing them. It's like when you're on a diet and somebody puts a chocolate cake in front of you. That's not what God was doing. God put the tree in the garden to give them the choice, the free choice. You can take everything that I have. But for love to be free, it has to be a choice. So I give you this choice to reject me. What kind of love is that? Like, my kids disobey me. I'm like, I don't think so. You know? But God loves us so much that he wants you to love him from your free choice. From freedom, a place of freedom. And then here comes Mary. And Mary is offered the same thing. Do you want everything that I have? And she says, behold, I'm the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be done to me according to thy word. It's that trust. My God is good. I believe. I don't know how this is going to be. And she even says, how can this be? Because I don't have a relationship with a man. And he's like, this is the plan. The angel Gabriel gives her the plan. You know, the Holy Spirit's going to come down upon you. Everything I have is yours. That's what makes us enough, is that God, who is so generous, he pours everything that he has onto us. And this is a question that I've wrestled with because the world always tells me I'm not enough. When I was 15, I struggled with self-harm, suicidal thoughts, depression. And depression is a thing that runs in my family. It's a thing. It's going to be a thing for me. And depression and anxiety are just a cross that I have to carry. But when I went to a retreat similar to this, the speaker talked about the suffering of Jesus Christ. And he talked about it, not just the physical suffering, because this was before Mel Gibson's The Passion movie came out. And so I had never heard the graphic suffering of Jesus, that he fell on his face and that he carried this heavy cross and that he was beaten near to almost death. I'd never heard that before, but what really got me was he said, Jesus felt lonely. His friends had betrayed him. So if you've been betrayed, he was betrayed. If you've been lied about, he was lied about. Gossiped about, he was gossiped about. All these different things, the loneliness, the depression, the isolation, all of these things Jesus went through, but he went through them and he took them on himself to show us that that's not the end of your story, because he brings it to resurrection. He redeems it. And he redeems you, and there is nothing so big in your life that can't be redeemed. And then I went to adoration for the first time in my life. I had never been to adoration, though I grew up Catholic. I didn't know what it was, but I just felt some kind of presence here and some type of love. And that changed my life. All my problems didn't go away. Like, I thought, well, if I just lose weight, then I'll be happy. Well, God has a sense of humor, because I've had 6 kids, and with every kid, I gained like 75 pounds. You know, like, my identity cannot be in my size of my pants. Then I thought, well, if I just have a boyfriend, then I'll be happy. So I went through a period of like serial dating. I just always have to have a boyfriend. And I dated boys I didn't even like, you know, just to always have a boyfriend. Although one guy is retired in Hawaii. Like, shoot. You know, like, already. So, but I felt like I always had to have somebody. And it wasn't until I was dating somebody that I thought I was going to marry. And things, like, he wasn't Catholic, and we were starting to have some big disagreements about the faith. And I was just like, Lord, what do I do? And I heard him say to me, you can stay in this relationship and I'll be with you, or you can break up and trust me. So I did. And I just focused on my relationship with God. Like, little by little, God has been healing the areas of my life where I felt like I'm not enough. Little by little, he's been showing me his goodness. I feel like my life is a journey of just discovering the goodness of God, because it's hard for me. I have trust issues. It's hard for me to let go. I have control issues. We got 2 dogs. I don't know why we did that, but we have 2 dogs, and they were really wild when we got them. And so I am walking them like by myself, and they're bigger dogs, and they see a bunny rabbit. The bunnies are just the plague of my existence, the bane of my existence. And so they see a bunny, and then they take off running, and they drag me through the street. And I'm all scraped up. And so I call the trainer, and I'm so upset. And he says to me, "Why didn't you let go?" It's a spiritual problem. It's like, I really have trouble with this. I really have trouble letting go and letting go of this expectation and feeling like I always have to prove myself. St. John the Baptist was a guy who had to answer this question too in a different way. But it's not, when we say, am I enough, this is not a question that we have to have the answer to, okay? So John the Baptist has been baptizing a lot of people, and he's telling people, behold, one is coming who will baptize you with fire that transforms, right? So Jesus comes to him from Galilee to John the Baptist to be baptized by him. John wanted to prevent him. John said, "I'm not worthy to untie the sandals on his feet. I am so unworthy." So he says to Jesus, "I need to be baptized by you." But Jesus said, "Let it be so. For thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness." And he consented. Jesus said it is fitting for us. Us. Jesus wants to work with us to fulfill all righteousness. You are enough because he has said so. And he chooses you to be here. He chooses to love you from his freedom. And he asks for a response of love. Because he knows this is where the healing is. This is where the truth is. This is where true freedom is. That he is here. That he changes. He transforms. You know, there's a big debate in our society, what is a woman, right? And I think as Christians, we have to answer a little bit of a different question. What does it mean to be a woman? What does it mean for you that you were born a woman? See, we're body and soul. We talked about that a little bit last night. You are the perfect combination of the physical world and the spiritual world. You're not a rock. You're not an angel. I don't care what your grandmother says, but it's combined together. You are body and soul human. And if we divorce the two, that's death. If you separate body from soul, that's death. And a lot of us are living in death. We've sold our bodies. Whether that's through pornography, or that's sending nude pictures, or that's self-harm, or that's eating disorders, or this self-hatred that's so intense that we just want to get out of our bodies. We're living in this place of darkness, in this place of death, that the devil knows he has no power over final death because there's resurrection. So he tries to keep us in this pattern of divorce, body and soul, where we just hate ourselves. So what does it mean to be a woman? If it's true, okay, body and soul combined, I cannot separate them. This is how I experience love, and this is how I live out love, is through my body, and this is how I'm going to experience resurrection, is through my body. What does it mean? JP2 says that every woman, by her body and soul, who she is, has the capacity for another person. Whether that's through marriage, or whether that's through having a child, or whether that's in her heart, she is built, imaged in her body, the capacity for another person, the capacity for others. That's why church, Mother Church, we call the church in the feminine sense. The church has the capacity for all God's children. is significant, and that's the place that we believe is our weakness and our vulnerability. And certainly people have taken advantage of that, whether that's through abuse, whether that's through abortion, all of various violences against women's capacity for another person. And we become hardened sometimes through this breaking of our trust, this breaking of our self-esteem, and we shut down. I don't want to have capacity for another. I want to be independent and strong so that nobody can hurt me. This capacity for another person is so significant that when you look at Blessed Mary, she had the capacity, physical capacity, for everything of who God is. His body, blood, soul, divinity. Our salvation began in the heart of a woman. There is no person on this planet that knows a person from the inside out except for a woman. That's not your vulnerability and your weakness, that's your strength. That's your empowerment. And it begins in your heart. When people are around you, do they leave better? Do you build them up? Do you bring them in and love them? And is that love transformative to the people around you? Are you a woman that builds up your girlfriends? Your capacity for another person is in your heart. And how we live out our feminine genius is what St. John Paul II talks about it as. How we live that out looks a little different for all of us. I really thought when I became a mom, I'd be really good at stuff. Like cooking, cleaning. There's a running joke on Facebook about my terrible cakes that I decorate for my children. One was so inappropriate, I can't show you, but it was supposed to be a butterfly, okay? I thought I would love this. I thought I would really, really transform, and that's been a wrestling for me. To be like there, and for my daughter, I see my daughter who's growing up with 5 brothers, and in some ways she's more stereotypically feminine, and in other ways she's tough and the boys are scared of her, you know? You may be a girl that really loves Taylor Swift concerts, or you may be a girl that listens to grunge metal. I don't know. I'm just saying something random that seems to be the opposite of Taylor Swift. I don't know. You may be a girl that really is into makeup and fashion. Or you may be a girl that's just happy that you put on sweatpants today. You know? That's not what is a woman. What is a woman is not the girl that wears the makeup and the fashion and the dresses and is really shy and sweet and demure. That could be. But that's not the definition. What is a woman? What does it mean to be a woman? Is that you are the very image of God's capacity to love in this planet. And that's imaged through your body, through your biology, but also through your psychology, through your experiences, and through who you are as an individual. And that is a beautiful thing. And it is powerful to think. Salvation began in the heart of a woman. But our fall began in the self-doubt. In this plant a seed of, is God holding back on me? Because if God was really real, then how come these bad things are happening in my life, right? And I don't know all the answers to why there's suffering in the world, but I can tell you that without suffering, God could have made a world without suffering. But without suffering, you wouldn't need generosity, compassion, kindness, friendship, community, charity, people lifting each other up. You know, I live in Oklahoma, and when there's a natural disaster, like a tornado or a flood, yes, you have people that go out and they commit crimes and they rob people and they take people's money and run off with it when they say they're going to fix their house. Yes, you have some of that, but you also have people giving their last pennies to bring strangers into their house and give them clothes and food. It brings out the greatness of humanity, that we live for others. But I promise you that if you use your capacity for another to open yourself to God, He will show up in a powerful and radical way. And it'll be ways that are unexpected. Ways that you're like, I don't even know how I'm getting through this situation in my life right now. This is really hard. From the outside looking in, this is really hard, but yet I have peace and I have joy, and it doesn't make sense. God is good. God is a good Father. And He's given us a beautiful mother. And that fatherhood and that motherhood can help to heal issues in our own family. So, that question, am I enough? You'll be thrown that question always from the world, and you'll wrestle with that. Oh, I don't feel pretty enough today. I don't feel smart enough. I wasn't good enough to make the team. I wasn't good enough to get into the college that I wanted to get into. That's how our culture is built on this, always having to prove ourselves, but our faith is not. God, I don't have to answer that question because you gave everything. And you look at the miracles in the Bible where Jesus' first miracle that was prompted in the heart of a woman, Mary asked him to transform water into wine. And it was the best wine, the best for last. And then when there was a huge crowd of 5,000 gathered and the apostles, they didn't have enough food and they're like, what are we gonna do? And Jesus is like, go bring me the loaves and the fish from this guy. And they get the loaves and the fish, and then it says they had more than enough. God is not stingy. He is more than enough. So as women, when we're constantly being redefined, being isolated, being put out, cling to the truth that this capacity for another is the image of God's love in this world. And He images that through you and who you are. So we're going to pray.